Well, the Lyons Review has made lots of progress, and part of that, and a really important part of that, was the call for evidence earlier this year, and we were amazed and delighted to get over 250 responses. So as a commission, each individual commission members had a batch of responses to go through. Several commission members looked through every response, so it meant that there was a real richness and a depth to the debate and to the evidence that we received. So the conclusions will be heavily informed by that, and we're very grateful for the fact that so many people have engaged with the review. Well, there are just a myriad of challenges actually, and we're following, I think, lots of structural problems with the housing market and cyclical problems and issues that have passed through successive governments. So there are some really, really big challenges. I suppose most of those challenges could be encapsulated in the word capacity. A lot of it has to be to do with removing barriers to capacity, whether that's in local government, housing associations, the private sector, right through to making land available and ensuring that our planning system works in the right direction. So there's a lot of very, very different and quite complex issues in play. I think capacity is a good way to describe what we're trying to do, which is to release capacity, either existing capacity, but also to find new capacity and source that from wherever it comes from. Well, targets and targets for house building in particular is an interesting one, and there's usually two sides to the debate, and one is don't set targets because you end up just chasing numbers and it takes your eye off building the right homes in the right places. On the other hand, from a CIH point of view, we're very clearly of the view that taking our eye off targets has actually taken some of the urgency out of the need to build and to be thinking about how we build. So we've just recently actually called for the reintroduction of a national target for house building, and all energies of government and across government focusing on that. So I suppose I'm biased in a way because my own organisation is very clear that targets work. When we don't have targets, it removes urgency. And I think that's part of why we've gotten to the situation we have done. And there's been lots of research that's shown actually that targets do work. I think more importantly than that, there's also a need to focus on the right homes in the right places. And that has to be about local authorities with their strategic housing role working in really close partnership with providers and with the planning system. So I think real partnering can really, really help, but it does mean sharing power and real sharing and real devolution of power and resources with it. So that's going to be the real trick, I think. Well, I think local government is critical, and actually I would say the ability to release local government capacity, whether that's in strategic terms and its strategic housing role, right through to local government as a partner in house building and potentially a house builder itself, or working very closely with house builders and providers. I think that's going to be a critical success factor in whether we get the homes built that we need. My organisation has been very clear in calling for the removal of borrowing caps for within local government. We think the constraints that are on local government are really ensuring that we are missing opportunities in terms of new supply, and work that we've done with partner organisations has shown that if we allowed local authorities to borrow an additional 7 billion, we could potentially be looking at up to 70,000 additional homes. So when we're in the shortage that we're in supply terms, those levers need to be pulled in the right direction. So I think there's lots and lots that we can do prudentially and carefully, but using local authority capacity in the right way, and of course making sure that that's done while the strategic housing role for local authorities is given as much importance as it should. Well, when I talk about urgency, I think new towns has to be part of that urgency, and saying new towns won't be the answer for everywhere, but I think they have to be a very important part of the answer on supply. So there's no question actually that new towns will play that role. I think with new towns, we're all very clear, and I think housing professionals generally are clear that new towns will always be a medium-term prospect, so because they take such an amount of time to build up. But I think what's useful about the debate and the public debate now is an acceptance that new towns have a role to play. The questions now is how, and how we do that, how we get the right structures in place, how we get the resources in place, and how we get the organisations there to partner. But it is going to take a lot of national leadership as well as leadership on a local level, and I think the leadership point is going to be a really critical issue as we go forward and think about new towns and supply more generally. Yeah, there's been a lot of debate on boom, housing boom, does it exist, is there a bubble ongoing? I mean, all of the statistics show that what we're seeing is a return to sentiment in the market. There's still a level of volatility there. Certainly there are parts of London where we're seeing very, very quick and sharp increases in house prices. But it's not universal. It's not even universal to London. And certainly outside London, the market's working very differently. And again, we've already seen just in 2014 changes and more changes to how the housing market would work. So I think a lot of this is about rebalancing and resettling of the market. There's been a lot of change in the last number of years. However, that said, so I wouldn't overstate the housing boom or housing bubble. That said, what we do need to learn is that housing starts and completions are cyclical. We do tend to see cycles, and what we've been saying at CIH for some time is cycles give us an opportunity to learn from previous and learn lessons from previous cycles. So as we think about the housing market for the future, and with any cycle there's a beginning, middle and end, how do we want this market to work? What do we really mean by affordability and access to decent housing? How do we make that work? How do we ensure that post-banking crisis we have the measures in place that will ensure affordable and access to lending of the right kind for households who can afford it over the long term? So there's big questions ahead, I think, to prevent a bust. We shouldn't automatically assume that it will happen, but we certainly need to learn lessons from the last cycle.